Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Reclaimed. I'm super excited for today's episode, and I know all of you are going to really get a lot out of the conversation today. My guest is Katie Falcone, and she's a certified integrative health and wellness coach and corporate burnout survivor and co-founder of Ground with Us. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And she runs a coaching practice that helps women leave and heal from toxic workplaces. So again, like I said, we're going to be talking about toxic workplaces, how it impacts women, and really the work that we need to do to heal ourselves from these types of environments that we're in. So stay tuned. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. Before we get into all of that, I want to just share a little bit more about Katie. She is really walking the walk here. So after a 12-year corporate career in brand strategy and advertising, Katie was pushed out of her role following parental leave. And that experience really, she says, cracked her open. It didn't break her, but cracked her open. And so she built Ground with Us from that lived reality, co-founding the practice with her mother, Karen. And together they bring over 30 years of experience navigating overt workplace discrimination and a multi-generational perspective to this wound that is created through burnout and toxicity in workplaces. So her methodology is to regulate, unblock, redesign, and it's nervous system led. So I want Katie to talk a little bit about what that means and how she goes about kind of working through the nervous system to help women heal themselves. But her strategy is really around this integrative nutrition, somatic trauma work, subconscious pattern interruption, gut brain science, and all that goes together that links our systems and how we respond to toxic workplaces. When she's not coaching, she's slowly growing a micro flower farm. Is it Hares Hill Flowers? Is that your micro farm,
Yes.
Katie? Okay. And so that's living proof of concept that everything she teaches foundation first. So I don't know, in all of your free time, I'm not sure how you're able to grow flowers. I don't think I have a green thumb, but maybe we'll hear a little bit about that. Sounds like probably a healing opportunity for some of us.
It
So
definitely
today
is.
we're going to talk about, again, most of these conversations of toxic work environments, we kind of just scratch the surface. But today we're going to go deep. Your nervous system, your gut, your hormones, your boundaries, burnout, and the stories that we inherited that kind of still run our lives and walk through our heads as we go throughout our corporate careers. We're going to talk a little bit about women leaving the workplace and motherhood. So lots of good stuff we're going to pack into this hour together. So with that, Katie, I'd love to turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit about, I tried to introduce you, but you've got so much that you do with your programs that you run. Tell us a little bit about that. And if you could share a little bit how your journey brought you to where you are today, that would be fantastic.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and that was the best intro I've ever heard. So kind.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So
Well, that's what planning does. We helps us do things well.
well, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm just so happy to connect with women because I just think this work is something that women really need right now, and it's going to connect us on a deeper level. So
Hmm.
I got into this work because, like a lot of other women my age and younger than me and older than me, I followed that blueprint that was laid out for me by my family, by societal norms, how we're taught what success looks like.
Hmm.
I got good grades in school. I didn't really speak up. I followed the rules. I went to college and then I went straight into the corporate world because that's what you do. That's what you're told is the safe route.
Hmm.
And in a lot of ways it is. And things are changing a little bit now with what's safe, but I just never really felt like I fit in in the corporate world, and I'm such a high achiever and my mother is so successful and I just learned so much from her work ethic and both of my parents' work ethic.
Hmm.
So I just kept pushing that belief and those things down in my body constantly. Um, a lot of stuff didn't sit with me in the corporate world. There was a lot of things that were swept under the rug that I questioned, a lot of practices that didn't really make sense for me. I
Hmm.
always wondered why we let the clients treat us a certain way, whether that's sexist or racist just to protect our our income and our and all of the like the deals that we had with them.
Mhm.
I spoke up a lot to defend my team. I was running a team of about 5 people, and I was always the go-to um, spokesperson. They always came to me to speak up against management, and that was always who I was.
Mhm.
But again, I never felt like I fit in, and I kept stuffing those emotions down in my body.
Yeah.
And I just kept burning out. I kept taking on more projects because I thought there must be something wrong with me if
Mhm.
I'm not fitting in this world. If everybody else is sweeping everything under the rug, maybe there's something wrong with me that I can't just go with the flow.
Mhm.
Um, which I think a lot of women do. They don't want to rock the boat, they don't speak up. And when I had kids, again, everything kind of cracked open. It was really hard for me to navigate being a mother and then also working full time. And I came back to the workplace thinking, how come nobody warned me that this was going to be so hard to
Yeah.
balance? And the women that I spoke to said, "Oh yeah, no, I'm not holding it together at all. This is impossible. My kids get out of school at 3:30. I have to work till 5:30. I'm not surviving."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I even got like a little angry about that because I thought, it's kind of up to women to be able to speak up and say, this is something that is really hard that you're going to
Mhm.
come back to. And
Yeah.
it just shocked me that no one really talked about it and that everybody was white knuckling it. And right around that time is when all of my physical symptoms of the workplace started presenting. um, 10 years of stuffing emotions in my body started presenting in weight gain, brain fog, headaches, lower back pain, um, sleepless nights, and just general burnout.
Mhm.
So I put myself through integrated nutrition school, and I understood the connection between food and mind and body. And I really was able to heal myself and my nervous system and get rid of that brain fog and remove some of those symptoms from the workplace. Clearing my brain enough to understand, okay, there's some sort of a pattern that's happening here. Why do I keep ending up in the same situation over and over again in these workplaces? It was probably about 3 or 4 workplaces in a row.
Mhm.
It was never the same toxicity, it was always something different, and it was never there was a toxic boss in one, job, and then there was kind of like financial instability in another role. It was always something different, but the same layer of toxicity.
Mhm.
And until I was able to do some of that subconscious reprogramming work of why did my why did I feel comfortable in these chaotic situations?
Mhm.
Why did they keep presenting for me? It just didn't, it seemed like it wasn't really a coincidence, right? That
Right.
I would keep ending up in those situations. And what I learned is that as much as we consciously want something, our subconscious is going to choose what is familiar every single time, even
Yep.
if it's toxic.
Yep.
And the way that that works is when we're 0 to 7, our brains are like little sponges. And everything that we learn in society, either from religion or from peers or from our parents or from teachers, is completely ingrained in what we believe success or work looks like.
Mhm.
So, somewhere along the way, I must have picked up a belief or a few beliefs, self limiting beliefs, that made chaotic workplaces not exactly something that I consciously wanted, but something that my nervous system was familiar with. So I kept
Yeah.
choosing it over and over again. And then once I was able to identify what those blocks were and unblock them and rewire some of those habits in my rewiring my brain and my able to unblock some of those behaviors and beliefs, um, I was able to actually get clear on what I wanted and what I wanted in my career and what I wanted in my life. And I think we're just taught to not want certain things because that's not the safe route. And we're not
Yeah.
taught to desire something that's off of the safe path. So now I've created an entire program in 90 days, which I call the Grounded Woman Container, which goes through that entire process. Took me 5 years. I've consolidated it into 90 days to help women really get safe, regulate their nervous system, clean up their health so that they can think clearly, figure out what those subconscious limiting beliefs are so that they stop ending up in situations where they're not making enough money or they're not getting the raise or maybe they're in a completely unaligned role or title or industry and then rebuilding from there from something
Yeah.
that they actually want.
Awesome. Well, I can definitely relate to some of the things that you shared, and it certainly brings up some questions just around, these environments that we're in. And one of the things that just resonated with me as you were speaking is this concept of power and how much of sort of power dynamics play into this. And what I mean by that is I think as we're starting our careers, we're young, we're obviously learning, we're trying to grow, and so I know, like, in that stage of your career, you're just doing everything you can because you're like, "I wanna learn, I wanna be promoted, I wanna, grow my career," and so you fall into this behavior mode of saying yes to everything, doing everything, trying to prove yourself so that you can grow your career. But I also think there's some level of what I don't know how else to say it, but like power dynamics between an employer and an employee. And so you brought up things like being able to ask for what you needed, or, as you had children, like that changes the dynamic with which you can work. And I know we're going to get into a little bit of that. Um, but the safety piece of speaking up and asking for things, to me, I go straight to this like power dynamic of the employer has sort of the power over the employee, because they're the ones that can say whether you're here or not, and they pay your bills, and you're getting a paycheck from them. So how much does that kind of play into these stories we tell ourselves? And like you said, you found the same thing at like three or four different jobs that you were at. Is there a power dynamic that we have to acknowledge? And then if we acknowledge it, like, what do we do with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it kind of goes back to how those beliefs were formed when we were younger. And it could be something as simple as you spoke up in class and a teacher embarrassed you. And
Mhm.
now your nervous system has picked up a belief that it's not safe for me to speak up. If I stay silent, then I'm safe.
Mhm.
And it's the same dynamic in society that women have carried from generation to generation. We should just be happy that we have a seat at the table,
Yeah.
and we should just be happy that we've come this far and that we should be happy that we even have a job. So don't rock the boat. Don't speak up
Mhm.
because it could get you into a position where you're not getting promoted or you're being looked at as a little too outspoken or hormonal or all of these tags that women get,
Yeah.
as they're going through these phases of life, whether it's, a menstrual cycle or coming back after maternity leave or going through menopause. And none of these employers are really very educated on what happens to a woman's body. I know we're getting a little off topic with that, but we're just so programmed as a gender to stay silent, to stay safe.
Yeah. Well, and again, I don't wanna go all over the place, but I just feel like there's so much for us to unpack here. I'm so excited. My excitement is getting ahead of me, but, the other thing you had mentioned is you felt kind of like, "I wish someone had told me what this was gonna be like when I returned from having a child, to work." And, I don't know your mom's circumstances, but my mom worked, but it was not in a what I would consider a corporate environment. It was more of like a small family business, and had some flexibility. And, when she was done with work, she was done with work. And so, and she wasn't doing that when we were infants and having to do, the daycare thing. And I feel the same way. I think I found how do I do all this? I felt very alone, very unsupported. I felt like it was all on me to figure out, and that's not a knock to my spouse, but just the reality was, I was trying to figure out how to be at work, how to be up all night, how to breastfeed, how to pump, how to be in meetings, and it just felt very heavy and hard. And to your point, like, it's like pull yourself up and just figure it out kind of thing. Um and even other women that I worked with, like, weren't coming alongside me to help me. In fact, I remember one leader I was talking to because my daughter was both my kids had, like, typical stuff, like, they just especially in daycares, felt like they were sick all the time in the beginning. And so, I was talking about an issue where, there was someone who said something about if I had to take off to pick up my sick kid or whatever the case may be. And this female leader had said, "Well, you should just do what I do and hire, in the benefits plan, you can hire a person to come to your house and like stay with your sick kid for 5 times for a cheap amount of money or something." Like someone I don't even know. And I said, with all due respect, I'm not going to have a stranger come and stay with my 4 or 5 month old baby when they're sick
Right.
that I don't even know. And so I remember being in that place, and I'm curious what you find with other women, and or why in the workplace are we not supporting each other? Why are we not coming alongside of each other? And to your point, like, yeah, we might all be white knuckling it, but it would have been nice to have some camaraderie,
Right.
like some support, even in that. So, do you find that a lot of women have that story, or is that more hit or miss? Do some people have a lot of support and others don't?
I don't find a lot of women have support because I think that the corporate environment pits us against each other.
Mhm,
And I think that there's a mentality that you need to come back as a carbon copy of who you were before you went on maternity leave. And if you cannot keep up, that's your problem. And then your job is in jeopardy. And I think a lot of women burn out because they're trying to give 100% to their job and they're trying to give 100% to being a mother, and
mhm.
it doesn't work. That's
Yeah,
why 500,000 women left the workforce last year because it's just not the environment was really not built for us.
right.
And it doesn't take into consideration that a woman's brain does not fully go back to normal until 2 years after she has a baby, and all the hormones leading up when you're pregnant, and I feel as though we get punished for having kids. We make less money. We get punished because we're a different person when we come back. That's not a carbon copy of what a corporate woman should be. Instead of leveraging everything that we gain from being a mother, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we become these incredible task managers. We can handle so much more than we could before we had kids. Why aren't we being leveraged for everything that becoming a mother gives us in the corporate world? I mean,
Yeah.
if there was any education on how we are able to expand our brain and take on more work and how we can actually leverage women and make and support them and make them more successful, I mean, we could rule the world. But I
Yeah.
think that that might be that might be what they're afraid of is let's not let's keep everybody in their place. It's a control thing. Um, but yeah, I don't see a lot of camaraderie. I do see a lot of women being pit against each other. I've personally dealt with way more toxic women in the workplace than I've dealt with men. The men were very supportive of
Mhm.
me and coming back from maternity leave. I think women take on like a masculine role and they feel like they need to turn into a man in order to climb to the top.
Do you think some of that, you had talked about, pitting us against each other. I wonder how much of that, there's obviously statistics all over the place around women at the top versus men in terms of equality and statistics of like percentages, rising to the top is typically still more male dominated. And I just wonder if that pitting against each other or that competition comes from a place of, if there's only going to be three women at the top, like I want to be one of the three. And if there's only going to be three, then what does that mean for the 50 of us that are down here looking at each other? Right. And so does that give us a mindset of like we're actually in competition with each other versus we're here to sort of lift each other up and help each other, do you think?
I think that the environment definitely creates that mentality. And I think I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but things are very different than they were when our mothers were in the workforce. A household wasn't dependent on two incomes. Right
Mhm.
now, I mean, most families, they need to have two partners working full
Yes.
time. And I
Yes.
think that a lot of the financial instability and the stories around scarcity and money and being able to provide for our kids the way that our parents were able to provide for us makes things way more competitive
Yeah.
and and just creates an overall toxic environment that pits us against each other.
Yeah, I also think it just creates a lot of pressure on women because I know in our household, yes, my household is very dependent upon my income. And so as a mother, I have my mothering duties, which I love more than anything in the world. I wouldn't give those up for anything. And but I love my job and I love working. And my husband always teases me. He's like, you say you could be a stay-at-home mom, but you would go crazy. Like, you've gotta use that brain of yours and, be doing stuff. But, um, I it creates also a lot of extra pressure on me for keep growing, keep pursuing more money, higher ranking titles, like, things like that, because it's to your point, our household is dependent on me just as much as it is on my husband. And so, Um, I just feel if something were to happen to my job, it would be devastating for our family, and that's a lot of pressure on me. I mean, do you find that with a lot of the women that you work with as well, that they're in that position?
Absolutely. I think a lot of women have also picked up this belief that, the house of cards is going to fall. If I
Mm,
lose my job, everything will fall apart. And a lot of the work that I do is centered around trying to remove the security of a paycheck, your complete sense of worth and your sense of security with a paycheck, because I think that's what the system does, is it
mhm,
makes you so dependent and so scared enough that you're going to lose the benefits, that you're gonna lose the income, and that everything's gonna fall apart, and that you're gonna lose your job, and you're gonna lose your house, and you're gonna lose your income, you're not gonna be able to pay your bills, when in reality, there's so many ways for us to tie our sense of safety to other avenues. There's so many ways to make money. There's so many ways to in this day and age have a side hustle, build an FU fund on the side. There's not a lot of financial literacy for women. I think men definitely get the bulk of that education.
yeah,
But if we were, I think we're also taught, give your max to your 401k because that's what you do. You need to make sure that you can retire, but
yeah,
you have no liquid money for, if something like this does happen.
right,
If you do lose your job, and I mean, as we know, the corporate environment is, not to scare anybody, but it's changing very rapidly. I'm sure every single person that listens to this has had a boss come in and talk to them about the AI initiatives and removing roles in order to bring in AI. Um, there's just a lot changing in the corporate environment, and we need to be prepared financially if something does happen, and we need to prepare our nervous system to register, "Hey, I'm going to be okay if I lose my job because I have X, Y, and Z skill, or I've done all of this internal work to know that I can fall back on my talents. I can fall back on an FU fund if I've started saving for that, and really just empowering women that this is not the only avenue, the
Yeah.
corporate job.
Yeah. So I'm going to skip ahead because and I want to go backwards because you touched on a couple of things that I think are going to be really important. But just in terms of um, looking for something else and being prepared is part of what you're working with women on is identifying things like, do you want to start a side thing? Do you want to start thinking about your own business? Do you want to start like how do you work with women aside from the like somatic and kind of emotional and integrative work that you do? It sounds like you're also looking holistically at like the financial well-being and preparedness well-being that people can have to give them a better sense of security and again, like, I wanna be clear, we started talking about, like, toxic work environments. It could be because you need to leave, right? It could be because I'm in an environment and I need to be in a place where I can leave and not have to work even if I don't have another job. Like, if this is not serving me and my family well anymore, I need to be secure enough to say, "Peace out, and I'm gonna go do something else," but I have built that financial security to do that. Or something like a job loss happens unexpectedly and you have something like the rainy day fund or whatever you want to call it to help get you through. But I know a lot of women, I'm getting a lot of stories and I'm seeing a lot that's just women are probably outpacing men in terms of like starting their own companies and going out and doing things outside of corporate because I think for all the reasons you're saying it's the reality of sometimes going back to work full time in the office, childcare issues, expenses, and or like this just doesn't serve me well anymore. And if anything came out of the whole COVID thing, I think we are having different conversations now than we had before because before COVID, I was in the office 5 days a week my whole career. Like
Yeah,
that's just
me
how it
too.
was, and I never questioned it, and I made it work. But I think after COVID, we all realized we can perform in an environment that didn't require that. It doesn't mean to me, like, I really think face-to-face relationships are really important, and building that with people is super important, so I don't think it's an all or nothing. But I think it has to be intentional. I think sitting in an office just for the sake of sitting there without intentionality behind it is probably not the best course of action either. So I'm just curious, like in terms of women that you're working with, building their own, thinking about, you said, leveraging your skills and your experience to do something different and pivot. Like what does that look like with these women that you're talking with? And how can someone who's maybe listening think about really, how do I get clear on those skills and capabilities so that I can think about what I would do if I had to build something for myself?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that starts when you're in the toxic workplace. So once you do the unblocking piece, you're
Mhm.
able to think clearly about what did I want before I followed the rules? And what did I want before I climbed the corporate ladder and I've gotten everything that I've wanted that society told me that I wanted, but I'm really unhappy because this
Mhm.
isn't really what I want and this is not my passion. And I think that really tapping into what lights you up? What do you like to do that you don't even want to eat, you don't want to stop because you're
Yeah.
so interested in what you're doing, and that could be anything. That could be gardening. That could be, that could be painting, that could be, designing, that I mean, it could be anything. I think we're just societally taught, like, this is the route that you take.
Mhm.
So and this is the safe route. So how do we tap into what we're really passionate about, and then how do we start talking about it? And you don't have to start a side biz. You don't have to leave corporate and completely start in a new industry. Maybe, build a business. Maybe you just want to, maybe you're in the wrong industry altogether, but you've convinced yourself that I've gotten this far, so I can't start over now.
Mhm.
Building a personal brand is one of the most important things that you can do for yourself and for your future. Start Create an Instagram, start talking about what you love to do on LinkedIn. I mean, that's really what I started doing with gardening and then just with coaching and what women were dealing with in toxic work environments. And I'm sure that you've experienced it too with this podcast. Just putting yourself out there. I think a lot of women are in this position where they hate their job. They don't see any other solution except move to a new job, even though it's not really what they want.
Yeah.
So if we can start if women can really just start speaking out about what they love and what they're passionate about and build an entire brand around that, that's really gonna get open up a lot of opportunities for you.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned something that we've talked about on another episode of the podcast, like this concept of people pleasing. And I know you've mentioned this, like not speaking up, not really being clear about what you want, kind of doing the safe thing, being good, following the rules, type of all that sort of. I bucket all that into some level of people pleasing. And so some of this is we've gone so long in our lives doing those things that we've lost sight of what you just described, which is what are we good at? What do we feel, passionate about? And, I'll share something vulnerably. I was talking to a friend of mine about this podcast. And when I was little, my best friend in the whole world and I would do things like put on shows and dance and sing and do things together. And we used to film each other doing a talk show. So, like, modeling it after Oprah Winfrey or whatever. And I always
Yeah.
loved being the talk show host. And we'd get the big VHS that my parents had and film our show. And I was teasing her, I was laughing because I'm like, I feel like I get to be Oprah now. I feel like I get to fulfill that, that thing I was doing when I was 7 years old and we were playing around and in our fantasy world. And so, but to your point, like this is joyful for me, and hearing women's stories and talking about things that we don't normally share with each other. I love it. I love hearing how people like you have overcome things and what you're doing to pay it forward to other women and help other women be successful and whatever that looks like for them, right? Because everybody has their own definition. Do you think the definition of success? So if I think about being in a corporate environment, I think of success being titles, pay, you're climbing the ladder, right? And sometimes we have to reframe our perspective of success. So you kind of touched on that a little bit in terms of like, go find the thing that you love. But do you think, it's the concept of the golden handcuffs? We get tied to
Mhm.
the paycheck, we get tied to the money, we get tied to the chasing. But it's scary to maybe reframe what does success really look like for us individually? Is that something that you typically find with women that they're kind of stuck in that um, I'm chasing after the check or the title type of definition of success?
Well, yes, because it's all has to do with what society has told us success, what you're worth. And a
Hmm.
lot of women have tied their worth to a paycheck,
Yeah.
to a title, to money.
Hmm.
And it's 30, 40 years of programming from society and childhood and telling pretty much teaching us our caregivers have taught us like what success and money looks like. So if you were a like 4-year-old and your parents were extremely successful, doctors, lawyers, and they worked 16-hour days, your mentality or your belief of success is I have to work 16 hours a day in order to be successful.
Hmm.
Or it could be, a single mother who has 3 jobs and a little kid doesn't really understand that she's sacrificing her time just to put food on the table, just to pay the bills, then your belief becomes, I don't trust women or women are it's not, it's not safe for me to be around women in authority because my mother really never showed up for me. And I think a lot of people also grow up in environments where maybe they didn't have as much as their peers did. So they're constantly trying to prove their worth through getting to a certain point in life or
Yeah.
getting a certain title. And it's really quite amazing to delayer where some of these beliefs came from. And even for women, we're given these titles of, my success lies in the fact that I'm a caregiver, or I am the respectful one, or I'm the overachiever. And we just adopt all these roles that are keeping us safe when we're younger. But
Mhm.
when we go into the world, it's really muddling our version of what success is, because it might have been something that kept us safe when we were younger, but now constantly being the perfectionist is just keeping you in this loop of um unhappiness
Yeah.
or just burnout. So our really our definitions of success and worth were created 30 years ago. And
Mhm.
until we're able to delayer and deprogram that, and especially the stories around money. I mean, if you had a parent that was constantly worried about money, and a parent that, never took a risk, you're taught that it's not safe for me to take a risk. If you had a parent that always told you, money grows on trees, that which I'm sure or money
I
doesn't grow
wish.
on trees. Right. You're taught you pick up all of these, it's not, and no one's right or wrong.
Yeah.
It's not like we can blame our parents, but we pick up these ideas around scarcity and success and
Yeah.
worth when we're so young, and it doesn't serve us anymore. So it's really just about figuring out what those stories are and
Yeah.
unblocking them and rewiring them in your brain.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I grew up the accolades for me came in my grades when I was in school, and so, that achievement of trying to achieve so that I got the sort of pat on the back that you did a good job, and I'm sure that that fed into the achievement that I was trying to drive with my career, um, and I also you and I are probably of a similar generation, it was kind of really I was very directly told you need to go to college, then you get a good job and to your point, like you play the corporate game, you do the things, you rise in your career. And the story I heard was if you do all those things well, you'll get the success that you're looking for. And I think a lot of women are looking around going, to your point, I did all the quote right things. I've done all the right things, all the things that I was told to do. And maybe I'm still not where I wanted to be in my career. Maybe I'm unhappy, I'm unfulfilled, or I'm working 100 hours a week. And this is not what I want to do anymore. I don't want to spend my whole life working. I want to actually do some things that I enjoy. And, you shared a little bit with me around women leaving work. There's staggering numbers about the volume of women that are leaving the workplace. But do you think women, especially maybe in kind of this midlife age of, I don't know, between 40 and 60 ish, I'll say, like, are we waking up and we're looking around going, this is not what I thought this was all going to be? And does that have something to do with this mass exodus that you think of the workplace, or is it something else? I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
I think so. I think women are looking around and saying, "Is this it? Like, is this
Yeah.
really what I'm working towards? Like, this is not this is not what I pictured it was going to be." And I mean, God forbid we want to spend time with our kids. It's almost like we have to apologize for wanting to take off work or prioritize our family. It's almost like looked down upon.
Yeah.
And what's wrong with wanting to completely map out your day the way that you wanna map out your day? Why is that the wrong way to do things all of the sudden?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women are real, like, they're doing a lot of the reparenting work and parenting at the same time,
Mhm.
and I'm not blaming the generation before us. I think There's a lot of generational trauma that got passed down from our grandparents to our mothers and now to us, and I think we're all just waking up and saying, "I know that I should be happy that I have a seat at the table, but I don't really like what this table looks like. I don't
Yeah.
wanna be at this table."
Yeah. Yeah. I wanna be at a different table maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny 'cause, I have a daughter, she's gonna be a senior, in high school this next year, and she's an incredible artist, and we talk a lot about career and balancing motherhood and, the conversations I think that I wish I would have had, I'm having with her, which is, this concept of if you really wanna prioritize motherhood, these are some of the things you need to consider. Or, she's a beautiful artist. And so encouraging her to start her own business. In fact, she's doing that now as a young person. And I'm encouraging her, like, if this is really what you want to do and this is the holistic life you want to have, entrepreneurship is probably the best bet for you because while I'm not saying it's not hard work, it is your work. And you're going to put your time and investment into something that's for you and your family that's yours and not building it for someone else and on their terms. And so you talked about like kind of we're reparenting and parenting at the same time. I'm intentionally trying to have some different conversations with her than maybe I had with my parents, and what cracks me up is I look back, like, my dad's always been an entrepreneur and owned his own business my whole life, but that wasn't I guess that was never a path for me, like, that never entered the conversation, it was always go to school, get a job type of thing, and so, I want my kids to know that there's so many options out there, there's not one path that's gonna be it, like, you have a lot of paths that you can take, um, but know that whatever path you take, there's gonna be trade-offs. Like, you're gonna have to go into it knowing what the trade-offs are. And so, I can really resonate with what you said, right, about just doing things differently, having different conversations, things like that. I wanna go back to, just back up real quick. We've talked about kind of this concept of toxic work environment. How do you define toxicity in work? Because it sounds like what I would maybe consider toxic work, which is like I don't know, sexual harassment or, these very pervasive things that come to mind. But I think what I'm hearing from you is it's probably a broader definition from your perspective. So
Definitely.
how do you
Yeah.
define it?
I think I think when somebody thinks of a toxic work environment, they think of a screaming boss or like a narcissistic coworker, but there's
Yeah.
just so many different definitions of it. It could be, we're not hiring for another role because we're trying to save money and then everybody burns out. It could be that you've been working somewhere for many years and you've never gotten a true raise or a title change. It could be um being in a company that is, financially unstable and maybe they're not disclosing that. And so there's lack of communication in the company. There's so many different ways that toxicity can come up. Um, I my I don't want to I hope my husband doesn't listen to this, but his manager, he begged for a new role, to be hired, just they needed a project manager,
Yeah.
and his manager basically said, "Well, we don't have the budget for that, so we have to take it out of everyone's bonuses to hire somebody new." I mean, there's just little tiny ways that things are that companies operate on that make you think, "Huh, that doesn't really seem right." Maybe you following every rule and, you're not progressing because you are so good at your job. So, I think a lot of people in those roles don't get promoted because the mentality is, "I don't have to worry about them, I can keep putting work on them, and they're gonna keep taking it because they're such a good soldier."
Yeah. The doers. Yeah.
Right. And then there's a lot of environments that are still very masculine. A lot of industries, I think most industries are very, very masculine driven. Um, so they don't take into consideration, benefits for parents. And I think it's even crazy to call it benefits, like that you're having a kid. It's not a benefit to take time off for having a child.
Yeah.
I think it's toxic when you look at a company's way that they're positioning parental leave, the way that you get treated when you come back from maternity leave, the way that you get treated if you are a woman going through any kind of change that a woman goes through and she's retaliated against if you're not getting projects because maybe they think that you're not reliable. There's so many different
Yeah.
layers to the corporate environment, and I think it's all just very the way that it's structured is very toxic. I think the 9 to 5 is toxic. I
Mhm.
mean, this was created in 1926 for Ford factory workers.
Yeah.
Why are we glued to a desk all day, every day, and expected to work overtime? And that's looked at as, being an overachiever. Burning
Yeah.
out is applauded
Yeah.
because you're putting more on your plate. Um, there's just it's the list goes on and on.
Yeah. No, I think it's great to define it that way though, because again, I do think a lot of people get the sort of traditional toxic mentality. And so I think your definition is good because it broadens the perspective. I want to touch on something because you had mentioned it and we kind of talked through this in prepping for this discussion. But okay, so I know we're getting close on time, but let's talk about menopause because you brought up changes and hormonal changes. And this has become such a big topic everywhere you turn now. Everything's about menopause. Every diet, every pill, everything is now about menopause. But and I do think women, like my friends and even women I work with at work, like there's an openness now to like even joke about it, about, oh, must be my hormones today, or are you hot in here because I'm I'm dripping in sweat, that kind of stuff. So I do think we are opening the conversation now, which is fantastic. But this concept of like being at this prime of our careers right when all of this hits. So it's like a lot of us, we've teenagers in the middle of perimenopause or menopause, however you want to define it, heights of our careers where we're probably at the point where we're ready to make like the most money with the most high, high job profiles that we've probably gotten. And we've been working towards this for 20, 30 years. And it's all colliding. And yet sometimes, just to be honest, I'm sitting in meetings and I can't even articulate something I want to say because my brain has completely taken that word out of its memory and I look like a babbling idiot sometimes, right? And so I have never heard any woman being impacted by menopause. I've never seen it. I have never heard a man mention it. I've never heard anyone complain about a woman who can't seem to function. I think we are masking it like doing all we can to mask these symptoms and things that we are feeling. But it's kind of similar to coming back from maternity leave, where we've got all this stuff happening to our bodies and we're supposed to operate as if nothing ever happened. Come to work. What is it? Work like you don't have children and have children like you don't work, right? Like, or mother like you don't work. It's that mentality. But some of that same stuff is happening now at this later phase of our lives. And again, I think there's more conversation now, but my whole career, I have never heard a woman talk about this ever,
Isn't that crazy?
ever. And it happens to every single woman that exists on this planet. So it's not like it's only this new generation that now is all of a sudden having menopausal symptoms, right? It's a fact of life for every woman that exists. But I've never heard it talked about until maybe the last 12 to 18 months.
I know. I mean, and I don't specialize in that. I work with a lot of practitioners that specialize in it, but it's like the same mentality as you said as coming back from maternity leave. Women have been white knuckling it
Mhm.
for so long, and I mean, I think the other generations, a lot of women were retiring on time, or they, left the workforce and they were, a one income family and it was fine. But I think the reason why it's popping up so much now is because women are higher up in the workforce and women are working longer. And it's almost like you get to this phase where you are like top of your game, but it's like they're ageism. I mean, that men don't get pushed out when they're in their 40s. Men aren't, moved to the side, and they don't hire somebody younger so that they can save money. I mean, it's a conversation that we should be having. Why is this happening to women? Why are so many women that are at the top of their game being pushed out of the workforce? There's so many women that I've talked to that are being labeled as hormonal. And there's a lot of gaslighting that's going on in the workplace because men are threatened by women that rise up to in the ranks and they want their job. And so I think a lot of men are kind of leveraging this phase that women are going through and, gaslighting them into getting pushed out of their roles in order to take their positions. Because this, I mean, if you think about it, we didn't really get this far high up in the company like 30 years ago.
Well, if we did, it was probably very, few and far between in terms of, yeah, like how many women were at the top. Yeah, I think it's funny. I mean, I try to laugh about it because I've sat in meetings. I remember standing. I had to stand, and I was standing talking to someone at work, and like I just sweat was just like dripping down. I was so hot,
Yeah.
and it was like that feeling of if I don't get out of here in a minute, I'm going to lose my mind. And I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything, but I also felt that same way oftentimes when I came back from maternity leave and I was at the time breastfeeding, and I'd be sitting in meetings and I'm like, if I don't go pump, I'm going to literally
Leak.
explode and leak. And like, how do you excuse yourself in that room when, you know, you're like, "I'm sorry, I have to leave now." Like, and then people look at, "Why what do you mean, why does she have to leave now?" I'm like, "I have to leave now." And so I think part of this is making it comfortable for women to express that there's needs biologically that we have that not everybody has, and I may have to excuse myself from a conversation, a meeting, because I have to pump, because I'm having a full on hot flash, and I'm like,
Right.
I mean, I'm having a biological response to some things that are happening to me. And, kudos to women that have sucked it up and just like, I made it through and maybe didn't complain. I had to run to the bathroom afterwards. I just think what I hear from women my age is like, I think everybody's getting to the point where we are tired of being the ones that have to hide what is just biological facts for our bodies as women. And, we talked a little bit about, women in the workforce and working moms and what we bring to the table. And I think about, emotional intelligence and multitasking and problem solving. I mean, raising humans is a pretty big deal. And, the amount of problem solving that I've had to do as a mother, and logistics planning and, all of the things that, to your point, um, I don't know that we see those as attributes per se. I mean, would I write that on a resume? Would I show up? What is that? That's not anywhere on my resume, by the way. None of that work that I do as a mother is on my resume.
Right. We're not getting paid for it. And I want to touch back on, what you said about like kudos to women who are able to power through. I mean, there's a lot of bad repercussions that are coming from the women that are white knuckling it, that are coming back from maternity leave, that are white knuckling it when
Yeah.
they are dealing with symptoms of perimenopause. And it's been proven now that when you push emotions down, it presents in high blood pressure, autoimmune, it manifests into chronic disease, into
Yes.
cancer. I mean, these emotions have to go somewhere. And a lot of times it turns to, negative medical consequences. So it's not really something that we should be, uh, striving to, applaud. It's really actually dangerous to our health that we're trying to, sacrifice what we're going through and who we are just to fit this mold in this company, because it is very detrimental to our health.
Yeah. Agree. I've talked a little bit on prior episodes of just anxiety in my early 30s. And that concept of like shoving things down and then they end up coming out somehow. And usually your body will physically manifest whatever emotions you're shoving down. I think that that's a really good point. So I always like to leave guests with something practical. um, I always love to leave women with like practical words of wisdom. If a woman feels like this is me, like you're describing me, I'm in this place, what are some practical things someone could maybe do today? And then tell us how someone could leverage someone like you, reach out to you for further work to help kind of process, all of these things that they're thinking and feeling.
Yeah. So I think what women can start doing today is I always like to say naming it. If you are having a trigger response and you can interrupt that response before you fly off the handle for an email or you run downstairs and grab a snack because it's like a dopamine hit
Mhm.
or whatever habit that you can interrupt when you feel triggered in the work environment, try and count to 10 and write down, okay, name the trigger response. This is, angry Katie
Mhm.
coming out. And then do the exact opposite of what you wanted to do. If you want to go grab a snack, go for a walk. If you're somebody who never speaks up in a meeting, speak up. If you want to rage text a coworker, pause and write it down in a journal instead. I
Yeah.
think I think that if we can start to just name our trauma responses and pause for 10 seconds to say, I'm triggered right now and this is what my nervous system is telling me that I should do because this is what I'm used to doing to stay safe.
Yeah.
Write it down.
Yeah.
Take 10 seconds and write down exactly how you're feeling and what you wanna do, and then do the opposite.
Yeah, I love that. I It's so funny you say that too, because um I have a rule for myself about, especially if you're frustrated with something at work or you're like wanting to fire off an email or be snarky about something. And that's very rare for me, but sometimes I get there. I write it down. I don't put to anybody, but I write it down and then I let it sit. And then I come back to it like an hour later and reread it. And if I still wanna send it and it sounds good and appropriate, I might send it, but I always give myself that hour to just go do something else and come back to it and reread what I wrote and decide if that's that's really what I wanna send. So I love the power of pause and, the doing something opposite. I find that being outside, taking a walk, just removing yourself from the desk, the office space, whatever it is you're dealing with, is often enough to kind of reset you and help you get into a better mind space as well.
Definitely. And don't
Yeah.
eat at your desk. That's, like, my number 1 rule.
I'm terrible at that. I can't say I do that well, so don't take my advice. Yeah, I do that all the time. There is proof though that you shouldn't do that. You should like sit down and have a proper meal and be calm about it. But yeah, I'm the worst. I'm the worst at that. Always have been. So, Katie, I think that there might be some women interested in doing this work with you and wanting to maybe reach out to you and get some more information about how they could work with you. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, go to my website, groundwithus.com. If you're, still considering trying to figure out if you're in a toxic work environment or maybe some of the subconscious inner child limiting beliefs kind of hit a chord, or some of those money stories that we talked about are really resonating with you, I have two foundational workshops that are really a prerequisite for working with me. They're self paced, they're both 5 days. And it's a really good way to get an idea of, where some of those trauma responses are coming from and how to regulate your nervous system, and some nutritional advice on how to handle being in the toxic work situation before you leave and how to build an FU fund. And then the work the work that I do, if you're ready to take on like the full package, is a 90-day program called the Grounded Woman Container. We cover everything in both of the foundational workshops, and it's really just a hands-on, hand-holding process, 90 days to recover, rebuild, regulate your nervous system, unblock all of those self subconscious limiting beliefs, and then figure out what your next move is, whether that's leaving, whether that's staying and getting a title change, whether that's changing industries, building a personal brand. It's totally customizable.
Okay. Awesome. And, I know you can go to Katie's website. You can find her on LinkedIn as well, as she posts a ton of fantastic stuff there if you want to just read a little bit about some of her content. Um, any other platforms, Katie, that people can find you on outside of LinkedIn and your website?
Yeah, definitely. Underscore ground with us on Instagram.
Okay, perfect. And I'll put all of this in the show notes so that everyone can link back to those places to find you. Any parting words for our guests in terms of our conversation today that you want to leave them with?
Yes, you are not broken. You are not in the wrong place. You just have been carrying a unhealthy story in your nervous system for too long, and all of that can be fixed.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a message a lot of us need to hear. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Like I said, we'll have all of the links to get in touch with Katie in the show notes. We really appreciate you listening in, and make sure to follow along and listen to all of the other episodes that we've released for Reclaimed.